Welcome back to episode 7, and Fluuf got out of the house! Oh no! Luckily he was right outside and I was able to pick him up, but imagine my surprise when I go inside and I don't see him, only to notice that he had escaped. Anyway, this episode we're going to be taking on 3 world bosses. Now, these world bosses are no joke. I have been saying this since the last, I would say, 2 episodes. But first things first, before we attempt our first one, I still need to put up the trophy of Kaya the Black Bear. I thought it would look really cool if I put it on the mountain just above Gourmand, only that little speck of rock didn't let me build on it, so unfortunately I had to build it on the iceberg just a little further down. It didn't look the way I wanted it to, but it's gonna have to do for now. I used my Thiacoleo in order to climb up. This is my favorite mount as it is so versatile when you're climbing up and trying to traverse the various maps. Now, because I've lost so many tames in the last couple of episodes trying to hunt down all of these world bosses, I'm kind of sick and tired of it, so I decided to take a different approach for Nanuk. Nanuk has already killed multiple of my tames, not to mention Kaya having killed a ton more afterward. So what I am going to do is I'm going to try to do a solo run. By doing that, I am creating tons of metal spikes. I created a ballista, tons of bolts, arrows, and large bear traps. The idea behind this is that I'm going to perch up high where I can fire the ballista from. Now these spikes is because the ballista will be high up enough where I won't be able to aim just below it. So these spikes would keep him at a distance so I could fire, and if all else fails, I'll have my bow and arrow. Now I do bring one mount. That is because, well, first of all, I have to get to where Nanuk is, and second of all, it will be my getaway if all else fails. Now, Nanuk has several spawning locations. This one is the closest to my base and it is the most open, perfect for a fight to the death. Now, I start setting up on a rock that I think is high enough to perch up on. This is my first time setting this up, so it takes me a little while to get it perfect. Now, it didn't end up being completely perfect, but for what I was going for, it will have to do. At least for right now, and you'll see why. So, I start setting up all these spike traps. I set up the bear traps. Now, the bear traps are to, hold it in place so I can get some good hits on it. I set up a little bit of a ladder just in the event that I fall so I can get myself back up quickly. The last thing I want is for him to catch me when I'm down below and kill me ravenously. But that is also why I am putting down a bedroll so I can get back up right away if I do end up perishing, which luckily did not happen, but you'll see that this first attempt did not go so well. So once all the traps are set up, I think I am ready, and now it's time to pull Nanuk. One thing you ought to keep in mind, at least right now as this is being recorded, is that a lot of the world spawns have multiple spawns. The spawning rate has been tuned up so much that you might get 3, 4, 5, even 6 of the same world boss in the same area, and that is no different for Nanuk. Now, right now, luckily there is just one, but unfortunately more do spawn later on, which means this open area is not going to be fully open to me. But they do keep their distance, which means this little side area will be completely fine for the one that I decide to pull, which I end up finally doing. It took a while, as you notice, that there were a couple of ballista bolts that I had missed because I tried pulling him with that. It didn't turn out so well, so I had to use my bow to pull him. Once he got close enough, then I switched to the ballista. He ended up getting stuck between these spikes and the rock. Not quite what I was going for, but I managed to get a ton of hits in him, just completely railing him. He ran away for a minute and then he came right back, climbing right over the rock and between the spikes. That scared the crap out of me. I did not expect him to just waltz right up the wall, bypassing all of the spikes that I had put down. I quickly get on my getaway mount and take off. Now time for round 2. Since the Nanuk had ran pretty much after me, it left them just far enough away that I could reset up the traps. I dispersed these spike walls a little bit more, I put down some more bear traps, and I noticed that more Nanuks are spawning further out closer to the waterfall. 3 are out right now, but that's fine because the one that I want is the one that's close and the other ones are far enough away they're not gonna bother me. So it is time for round 2. I use my bow and I pull Nanuk. Nanuk decides to go to the left this time instead of the right. I do get some hits in with the ballista, only for him to just suddenly start ignoring me, which was kind of annoying. But eventually his attention did turn back on me, and then he veered right to the left, bypassing all of the bear traps, at least most of them, and then soon enough, when he gets out of that bear trap, he bypasses the metal spikes that I had put down, going right up the wall again. This was crazy. I did not expect this to happen a second time, especially after altering my first iteration of this little setup. So it is back to the drawing board and trying again for a third time, if I can get away, that is. Luckily the deer is fast enough that I can run away, and Nanuk does get stuck in a bear trap, which helps me to escape. So I edited this part out, but I did end up going back home to make a ton more bear traps, as you see here, and a lot more spike traps. I wrapped it completely around the cliffside, hoping this time it would stop Nanuk from running up the wall. I even made a bit of a hook and ran it right up the wall, making it very steep. So hopefully this would stop him. Unfortunately, it did not. You'll see in a second here, but I go to pull Nanuk one more time in hopes that this will finally be the battle that I was looking for. Of course, granted, I don't pull the other 3 to 4 Nanuks running around the ice caps. It is time for round 3. It takes me quite a while in order to pull him. Now, I edit all of that out so you don't see it, but it took me about, I'd say 3 to 5 minutes of shooting my arrow blindly trying to pull Nanuk. Eventually, I do land a hit, which catches his attention. He comes straight for me, exactly what I wanted. He gets caught in a bear trap, and I load him up full of the ballista spikes, and then I see him veer off and head up the mountain. Oh no, not again. Not after I put all of those spike walls down. Sure enough, he fucking did not care and went over them. So I quickly got on my mount and ran away a third time. But instead of actually running away, I thought, what if I just kite him? I noticed that he gets stuck on one of the bear traps as I turn around, and I start loading him up full of arrows. As he starts to chase me, I would run and start to kite him, just like I would if I was on my wolf mount. Now, I didn't bring my wolf mount this time around. I thought it would be cooler to bring the deer, and I thought the deer would be fast enough, which it is just fast enough to kind of outrun Nanuk, but it's not fast enough to really kite him, as the moment I start to get enough distance, I turn around to shoot an arrow, and Nanuk catches right back up to me. So yeah, back to the drawing board. After 3 attempts, fully broken armor, I've ran out of arrows, and a lot of my metal spikes and bear traps are pretty much gone, so I'm gonna have to rebuild and try again later. For now, I take a break and I head back to the plains, where I try my hand at taming a Carcartodontosaurus. Now, these are relatively new to Ark, so I have actually never tamed one before. This is my first time attempting it. Now, I read up on it and I decided to try it, though my method, as you see here, was not the optimal one, so it didn't work. How it works is that you have to offer food to the Carcartosaurus, and when you do, he will start to slowly build up a bar. When that bar is full, he will let you ride him, and that is when the taming process will happen. Now, that little bar that I mentioned will go up based on what you feed him. So I tried feeding him raptors and even the Phiomias, something big and heavy, at least as much as I could carry, but they were not enough for him. I found a way to cheat the system though, by killing a baby Diplodocus. A Diplodocus is a very high-leveled creature in terms of stats, so it would definitely fill up the bar faster, and with the baby, it was easy enough for me to carry because I can't carry a full full-grown adult. Sure enough, it worked, and the Carco was letting me ride it. Now is when the taming process happens. You have a short amount of time to eat as many creatures as you can. This is what's going to fill up the taming bar, but if you are hit, the taming bar will be reduced, so it's best to go after herbivores that won't fight back. Luckily, in the plains, there are tons of parasaurs, horses, and other creatures that you could prey on. It took a few minutes, but eventually I do tame the Carco. I thought this would be an excellent tame in order to take on bosses. It has so much health, it would be a great tank. Unfortunately, this is not really the best one for a solo or at least one-on-one fight against a world boss. Now, if it was the spider boss or some sort of boss that would have, little tames next to it, little add-ons next to it, then it would be perfect. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. With the Carco, he has the weakest amount of attack. Now, when you kill and eat little things, he gets a buff that stacks and makes him stronger. Eventually, it could make him stronger than a Giga, but again, that's not going to work for a one-on-one, only with maybe like the spider boss. And here's the crazy part, shortly after taming him, I found an ascended saddle for him in a red beacon. That was crazy, but anyway, it was time to move on to the aquatic areas. So, there are 2 boss battles left that are water creatures. Before I could take them on, I decided to head out deep into the ocean and tame more dinos. I start off with a few more turtles, and then I see those fish guys from Arc Editions. I actually do not know how to pronounce their names, but holy crap, the moment they start charging you is the scariest thing I think I have ever seen in this game. Look at how he charges you with his maw right open. He grabs you, he thrashes you around in the water. I had no idea what the hell was going on. I was definitely taking damage as my armor was breaking, but I was still able to shoot my crossbow, which eventually did drop him down. The other 2 didn't grab me like the first one did, which allowed me to get some shots in and also take them down. I eventually tamed all 3 of them, and they joined my party. I did also at the same time tame a few more turtles, as I mentioned before, and I go to tame a Baleosaurus. Don't ask why I tame a Baleosaurus, I just wanted one, and there was at least 2 of them there, so I thought, why not? Now, this whole segment took me about hour and a half, and all the while, I was getting the freezing debuff, which meant I had to keep eating because I kept starving. So, just off the shore there where you see me, I set up a small little camp with a campfire. You're not going to see it in the edited footage because it's kind of boring. I just start up a campfire, cook some food, and it starts cooking for me while I continue to tame more creatures. Now, as I go a little bit further out with my brand new tames, I start to hear boss music. I open the map and realize I'm not near the Black Demon, which will be the next boss we fight, but I see in front of me a white Baleosaur. Now, the spyglass will say Baleosaur when you zoom in on it, but do you see the scarring there? That's because it's not just any Baleo, it's actually a world boss. This is Maelstrom. For some reason, the name does not show up, but it is in fact a world boss, and it is the easiest one in the map. Why do I say that? Well, because it is a Baleosaur, and they will not fight back. So, you can have all of your tames rush in and take a chomp out of it, and none of them will be hurt while doing it. This will be an excellent way of grinding up levels if you need to do so, as again, none of your creatures are going to die like all of the other bosses. But anyway, I kill Maelstrom, no problem. I see that the trophy is in my bag, and it is time to head home. Now, I don't know if this is just a me problem or a map problem, but I've noticed, even since the start of my playthrough, that Mosasaur don't move. They seem to all be stuck, and it's not just this one that you see on the screen here. It is every single Mosasaur I have found. They have all just, sat there. They don't move. Even if you hit them, you can get up close, and unless you get really close, they can't hit you. So I figured, you know what, there's one right there, why the hell not? I knock him out and I tame him. Now then, on the way home, there is another boss fight, which is, as I mentioned before, the Black Demon. The Black Demon is a large shark that is all scarred down the middle. It kind of reminds you of Jaws a little bit. Now, he does have multiple spawning in the wide ocean. This one is the closest one to my base in this giant gorge. Luckily, in order to bypass him, you can just be on the surface, and he's not high enough to, aggro to you. You have to really swim down into the gorge in order to even start hearing his boss music. But eventually I see him, and I rush in with all of my aquatic tames. This is the final boss to fight, at least for the underwater zones. After that, that's it for the underwater, and it's just the few that are on land until I beat this map. Now, the great thing about the Black Demon is that even though he hits like an absolute truck, he can only hit what is directly in front of him, and he has a very slow turning radius, which means he's not going to do nearly as much AoE damage or cleave damage as the other bosses. So your tames can easily swim around him and get him from behind. I do see a shark die there, and for a moment I thought it was mine. Luckily, it was just another one that kind of added on to the boss fight, but eventually he does go down. It takes several minutes, about 2 minutes if I timed it roughly, but that means I have finally finished and conquered the ocean, which leaves only about 3 more bosses left on the land in order to finally beat this map. Once I headed home, I start setting up all the trophies. Now, the Maelstrom one, I did not know what to do with it, as it's a half mount, as you see there. I tried different areas to see how it would look. Eventually, I settled for the middle of my hut, kind of where it turned in. It looks really good there, especially next to Goliath. I put the Black Death up on the iceberg, kind of near where the bear was as well. And something that is different from the last time I played is now all of the various trophies or artifacts are now being dropped by the world bosses. At first they only dropped blueprints, so the first 3 bosses I killed only gave me blueprints, but now they are dropping actual artifacts. Anyway, while I was taking a break from hunting down the giant world bosses, I decided to look for some honey out in the redwoods area, where I stumbled upon a cave. Now, I had brought one of my bears with me as a mount in order to, traverse easier, and also to protect myself from the bees should I find any. Now, this cave I thought would be a small little crystal cave like the one I had found a couple of episodes ago. Unfortunately for me, this ended up being a full-blown cave, one that I'm going to have to explore later, as once I use my spyglass to take a peek down there, I see tons of the cave spawns, from the scorpions to the spiders, even the centipedes. So yeah, that's gonna have to be an exploration date for later. A few hours of gameplay later, I had a great idea. I put down a war map to see if it would show the Appalachian map, and it does. It used to not do that, it would only show like the island, but now it actually shows what map you're on. So what I do is I take some red paint and I circle everywhere that a world boss would spawn, putting an X through the ones that I had defeated, which shows that I have 3 left. I still have the Thunderbird, I have the Mammoth, which you'll see pretty soon here, and I have Nanuk. But speaking of the Mammoth boss, I head out to the tundra area to look for some more tames. After all, I am down a few from the last episode. I see a couple of rhinos that would be perfect, but as I approach it, I hear boss music. This is strange. I've been out here several times already, and I have never heard boss music until now. I pull up my spyglass and I see it, the world boss Mammoth. I do not know how to pronounce its name, so apologies for that, but I knew because it was a mammoth, it should not attack me theoretically if I run up to it unless I hit it first. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to see how much health it actually has by using a spyglass, and holy fucking shit. Yeah, this thing has over 1 million health. No wonder it takes so much damage in order to kill these bosses. Now, the mammoth itself has about 1 million. The other bosses can have 1 million, but they might have around 600,000. It really depends on what you're fighting. But what is even more surprising is that I find a Yutyrannus. This is the first Yutyrannus I have seen on this entire playthrough. I thought that they didn't even spawn on this map. That's how much I've been exploring and have not seen any. This is crazy. So I thought, because it is so rare, I have to tame it. I try to tame it on mounted back like I normally do, but it didn't work as it only feared my creature. My creature then led the Yutyrannus to the newly tamed woolly rhino, which then proceeded to kill it, and that's kind of unfortunate. But it was time now for the finale of this episode, which is taking down Nanuk. Now, this little area 3 times in a row has failed me, which means I need to pack up and try a different area. Luckily, right across the way was another rocky outcrop that would be perfect. I slowly start moving everything over. Luckily, Nanuk is nowhere to be found, at least in that immediate area, because further down the way, there are 5 of them. You see 4 of them there, one of them is a bit off screen, but there are 5 Nanuks. So yeah, I am not going to be setting up here. I'm going to be setting up closer to where you kind of saw that green beacon, but closer to the rocks. It took me a while, but I eventually did set up. Now, this is a smaller area, so I was able to condense all of those traps and walls that I had been building from the last 3 attempts. And it was time to try again. Now, this time, things are going to be a little bit different. Not only because of a different setup, but I also have the Appalachia, so I can climb up high if I need to. That is how I got up here. This is high enough that Nanuk should not feasibly be able to climb up unless it's just hacking the game. I will also be utilizing my crossbow. I try not to use it often unless I'm just taming something, but I will be using it for fire arrows this time around, and a compound bow, which I found in a beacon not too long ago. I didn't want to use it because I felt it was a little bit too modern, but then I said, what the hell, it's still a bow, so it's gonna count toward my primitive playthrough, as it is not a gun, which is the rule of my playthrough, is to not use guns. So I didn't make it using a fabricator. It is fair game. I used a couple of metal arrows that I found, but I primarily would be using stone arrows, as that's the only ones I can create myself. The metal arrows are what little I found off of beacons. I have a ton of the spear bolts that I made myself, and the fire arrows, while you cannot naturally make propellant because some of the materials are missing off the map, propellant can be found in the beacons, so I was still able to make the fire arrows, though only a limited amount, so I'm going to have to sparingly use them. Now, I had to keep only a little bit on me because this stuff does get quite heavy. I put some of it in the chest on the platform behind me, so if I did run out, I can quickly grab more and keep firing at Nanuk. So the method this time is that when he runs up, he would get caught in the bear trap, which I would load him up with the spear bolts. As he would run away, I would chase him on the Appalachia and start to kite him. Of course, this would not last forever, as the Appalachia eventually does run out of stamina. I would wait until he gets low and use what little is left to climb up on the rocks, where I would continue using the ballista again. I basically rinsed and repeated this method for about 10 to 15 minutes. Nanuk has a ton of health. You would think that the ballista bolt would take him out relatively quick because you could take out a T-Rex in just a few hits of the ballista. No, Nanuk took like 10s, 20, 30 more spear bolts plus metal arrows from a yellow quality compound bow and being on fire. And sometimes when I ran out of bows while kiting him, I would have to bite him a couple of times with the Appalachia, who already has a boosted melee attack. So yeah, this is, I think, one of, if not the hardest boss on the map. I was starting to get very fatigued while fighting him, not just in the game, but in person. Again, this took like 15 minutes of just rinse and repeat. Climbing up, hitting him with the bow, jumping down, hitting him with the arrow. It was getting tiresome, and I thought, why will he not die? Eventually, as I'm running really low on arrows, I take a couple of last-minute bites with the Appalachia, and he finally goes down. For a second, I thought he had turned around, so I went to run around again for him to chase me and kite him more. But then I realized, wait, he's not chasing me. He's finally dead. Holy crap, it took so long, so many attempts, but I finally took down Nanuk without losing a single tame, at least for the last 3 rounds. So yeah, it was terrible. I absolutely hated this boss and was praising whatever nature god on this map that I finally defeated Nanuk with the help of Leo here, who did take a little bit of damage in the fight. But anyway, that is going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next episode.